This programme was produced at and first aired on MPR, Manawatu People's Radio, with support from New Zealand On Air. Ka pai Irarangi Tamotu, MPR.
Kia ora and welcome to Reserved Recommendations, a show about problematic faves, great trash, difficult art, and our complex relationship with art and entertainment. My name's Hugh, I'm the host, and I'd like to put in a very mild content warning for this show as a whole. Sometimes our recommendations on this show are reserved just because the thing that we're discussing is in some way not good. But sometimes there are aspects to the art or artist that may be confronting for some people. Read the episode descriptions for more information and do be aware of your listening environment. Kia ora and welcome once again to another episode of Reserved Recommendations. This is a show about great trash and complicated relationships with art and culture, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome today's guest, Stuart Drake. How's it going, Stuart? How are you doing this fine evening?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm currently staying in Taupo, and it's very nice.
Excellent.
How about yourself?
I'm doing very well. I've only ever stopped in Taupo on my way somewhere else. I've never actually stayed there for any period of time, but I have children, so the main thing I remember about Taupo is it's got like a really good giant playground, which is,
yes,
a plus.
Right next to a toilet that they charge you money to use. That's the Taupo experience.
The user pays toilet it's a special thing. It's not the only one. There's another one. I forget what town it's in, but every time you come across one, you just, yeah.
Yeah, the amount of times I'm walking around going like, who carries a 50-cent coin on the chance that they need to use the toilet? Like, it does not make sense to me, but, they got to make their money, so, okay.
Yep, that's the one, and it's clearly funding something very important. Well,
yeah.
to progress onto the topic of tonight's conversation, the thing that you said you wanted to talk about was Sonic the Hedgehog, and I'm fascinated to hear about your take on this, really, because Sonic's, like, you could have a lot of different takes on Sonic as a character and a franchise, and I'm curious to hear where you're coming from.
Yeah, it's tough because it's one of those things where there are 400 different canons, and there are like factions of people that hate each other based on which canon they prefer, the things that they consider legitimate. There's an entire decades-long comic strip that a man called Ken Penders was one of the creating driving forces behind, that Sega one day just decided all of that didn't count anymore and just threw it all away and just reset everything. There was a big controversy there. But I was the kid who had a Super Nintendo, but my friend had a Sega, and I just desperately wanted a Sega because Sonic was so cool and Mario was not cool, unfortunately.
See, at this point, I had a Commodore 64 because my dad wanted to use it to write on. Basically, he wanted to run word processing software on it, and so I simultaneously felt superior because I had a real computer, not just one of these consoles, and also envious because the games had graphics that actually looked like stuff.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, so your relationship with Sonic then goes back to, the first Sonic game?
Yeah, or I guess it was probably the second Sonic game. I think that was the one that that was the one that was packaged with consoles, in the, early to mid-90s when I would have been, just growing up. I think that was the one that really blew up. So I think everyone my age played Sonic 2 was the one that got them into it, yeah.
Yeah, no, that sounds right, because I suspect I'm probably about 10 years or so older than you, possibly more. And
yeah,
so
that sounds right. Yeah.
The Sonic 1 and the first generation of Nintendos were the thing going on when I was at primary school. So what was it that kind of took you about Sonic then? Like, what was it that drew you in and made that the thing that you wanted instead of the Super Nintendo?
It was always the characters, and that's the thing that has kept me interested in it as when I say interested in it, it's like one of those things where I just kind of have one foot in this pool, and I don't tell anybody that I have this foot in this pool, Like, I was the kid as a teenager that was on, like, a Sonic fan forum. Like, I met so many friends I still have just through talking about Sonic on the internet. But the thing that is interesting to me is the very clear-cut characters that they initially had, and now as it's got to sort of what we're at in 2020, there are 400 differently coloured Sonics, all called, like, Blaze and Silver and Cool the Hedgehog, and, like, that's not interesting to me. What's interesting to me is this kind of almost Mickey Mouse-esque characters that kind of have very clear-cut personalities, and just I enjoy the I don't know, it's just this nice, it's almost like a little Japanese cartoon is sort of what I like. Yeah.
So where did the characterization come from then for you? Because one of the things that strikes me about Sonic as a character in opposition to, say, Mario is that as soon as Mario has any kind of characterization at all, he's very kind of cheery and affable, and he's the "it's-a-me Mario" guy, like, as soon as that's technically feasible. But Sonic's almost like a blank slate for a lot of, particularly the early games. Like, really, he's spiky and blue, and he goes fast. But even going fast is, like, it's an odd game mechanic, because in some ways it's not like a thing that solves puzzles. It's just kind of the way that you move.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because a lot like Mario, nowadays Sega have a lot of mandates around what Sonic is allowed to do, what he's allowed to feel and do things like that. Like, there is actually a mandate in, like, when you're working on a Sonic game, Sonic is not allowed to be incredibly upset. He's not allowed to show despair or any of that. He has to always be, hey, yeah, here we go. And so there's, like, really awkward. There's a moment in one of the later games where, for some reason, in the localization, they wrote in that Sonic was in prison and was being tortured. And so they cut to the prison after he's been in prison for a year. And he's just chilling, kind of going like, whoa, you'll never get me, I'm Sonic. And you're like, well, that's not interesting at all. That's silly. I don't care about this. But there was a particular thing that we just stumbled upon just by dumb luck as kids, was this... It was a 2-part Japanese anime that got released as a film in the United States, direct-to-video. And they were basically given Sonic 1 and I think Sonic 2 and maybe Sonic CD. And they were just given those and they were told, do whatever you want. And so they sort of built character types and personalities out of the characters. And they're the ones that I really love because they've done interesting things with it. So you talked about Sonic being fast, and that's kind of his only character trait. In this, he's impatient, and he's irritable, and he doesn't want to deal with anybody's shit. Like literally the film opens with Tails, Tails, two-tailed fox. In the games, he's a useless character that kind of just follows you around. So in this film, he's a little kid. And he's like, hey, but he's also an inventor. So he's like, I've made this hoverboard. And Sonic basically tells him to fuck off. Is the first thing that happens in this film. Is Sonic goes like, leave me alone, I don't want to talk to you. And then sort of 5 minutes later, he realizes Tails is in danger and he leaps into action. And you sort of see that, they have this nice, this nice personality. They have this nice little rapport. Knuckles was this... I think in the first time he appeared, he was just a villain, and he just showed up and hit you, and then he ran away. And so they kind of built this lone wolf kind of reluctant hero rivalry with Sonic, which is always interesting to me. And and then obviously Dr. Robotnik is just a cartoon, and they can make him very silly. But I always really loved that, and I sort of I actually did rewatch the anime movie in preparation for this, and I just really adore the characterization of those people and the world that they've built. It's not at that point there wasn't any lore to do with the series, and so they looked at the games and said, well, that's not Earth. This is the land of the sky, and there are these layers of the planet that kind of go like this, and if you go between the layers, you get to the land of darkness, and they had all of this stuff, and it was like, Dr. Robotnik lives in the land of darkness, in the Robotropolis, and it was, we've got to go down there to, stop the city from blowing up. Whereas nowadays, you're not allowed to have Sonic be irritable and you. I have a feeling they even have a mandate that, like, nothing is allowed to change between the games. So they it basically just has to be fluff, where they can, like, I think the plot of one of the recent Sonic games was that it was Sonic's birthday, and then the birthday party gets attacked by robots, and like that was the basis for the game, as opposed to anything worth paying attention to. Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because you're talking about this anime, and the way that you're describing Sonic characterized sounds very much like a kind of 90s anime hero. Like that's the guy who's annoyed by everyone but still steps in to save them because he just can't help himself, is kind of a classic anime trope. But there was also, I think there was an American cartoon TV series that I'm pretty sure I remember being on TV.
There were 3.
Yeah, I remember one of them being on TV like after school for me, so that would have been kind of early 90s.
Yes, yeah.
And the characterizations are not really consistent across any of those things.
Yeah, there was, I think, at exactly the same time, there was quite a serious, dramatic Sonic cartoon, a very silly one, which it sounds like was the one you saw, where it was kind of just like non sequitur jokes, and it was kind of just like, half the time they didn't have background drawings, they were just on a flat color or a shape, like it was just like abstract. And then there was Sonic Underground, which was the spin-off one where they had guitars and they were in a band and had magic powers through their music. So there's absolutely no consistency across anything. And I think part of their terrible mandates now are an attempt to kind of have some kind of canon. Like, I think now they have a thing where the old Sonic, who was just silent, is like an alternate dimension Sonic, and the cool modern one that's like, hey guys, like that's a Sonic from a different dimension, like that's where they're going with that.
Which is a very odd choice, because the like, hey guys, Sonic is such a kind of like late 90s affectation to have about being a radical dude who I'm trying to think of more like bodacious, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I think that's my problem with it, is that they're, in their attempt to kind of make it all cohesive, they kind of just got trapped in like 1999, maybe like 2000, 2002, but like that's where they're stuck. And it's actually sad to me, because I genuinely think there's interesting things to do with the characters. It's a fun world. Like, honestly, a dream of mine would be like to write an animated Sonic movie. Like, that's just like, it has there's such a fun world to play with, and they just have no interest in playing with it, as it seems. Yeah.
I mean, it's a thing that you can kind of contrast with I guess Nintendo's approach with Mario, which has been, they did have very consistent characterization right from the start, but they've been really willing to lean in on stuff that's just as goofy as hell, and just go, that's how it is, and that's how it's going to stay. But it means that, I guess, like, the lore feels less forced, because just someone made a pixel art decision in 1985 or whenever, and they've just leant into that forever, but now it's kind of become a thing.
Yeah, and Sonic games tend to have this thing where every time a new game comes out, they couldn't help themselves, and they've had to jam some kind of gameplay gimmick or mechanic into it. Like there's the one where, in this one, both dimensions of Sonic are in the same game, so you get a side-scroller and a 3D game. And then there's, the one where it's Sonic was imprisoned and tortured, and this one's a war story for some reason. Or there's the one where they call him a werehog. Every time it turns night, he turns into a werehog. It was pointed out to me that werewolf means man-wolf, so werehog actually means man-hog, but that's something completely different. Yeah, so it just sort of seems like for at least a decade, since the Dreamcast, really, so I guess 2 decades, they've had no idea what to do, and so they're just kind of like, just try this, he's a werewolf now. This one's a gritty war drama, except we can't have Sonic be upset, so I don't know, like...
A gritty, entirely consequence-free war drama, because there are lots of those.
Yeah, which is in stark contrast to this anime movie that I'm talking about, which, I mean, spoiler alert, Dr. Robotnik has created a metal Sonic that has all of Sonic's traits, but is a killer and wants to kill people. Sonic has to take this thing down, and Sonic just gets the living shit kicked out of him by this robot Sonic, and it's quite violent. Like, I think, from memory, there's blood in the film. Like, Sonic gets punched in the face, blood comes out, and the film ends with this metal Sonic realizing what he is and throwing himself into lava, saying there is only one Sonic. And like that's incredible. Like it's Terminator 2 but with Sonic. Like it's amazing, and just like I it's baffling to me that they've discarded that and landed on like a birthday party for Sonic as the plot for the games. I'm sort of going Yeah,
it really seems like they're trying to be all things to all people, like they're not happy to have Sonic just be a children's character and for everything to be nothing but light fluff and silliness. They want some sort of sense of edge, but they're also not willing to be like, no, Sonic is like a mature character now, and only, we're not making children's games with Sonic anymore. And you can't really walk both of those lines, I don't think.
Yeah, and that's what's always interesting to me about the older stuff, is I think they did a good job of walking the line, where as a kid I adored this thing, and as an adult I watched it and sort of said, oh, all the pieces of the script are in the right place, and these characters really make sense, and I understand their goals and what they're doing. But nowadays I read a Sonic story and I'm like, what is this? Like, this is 100 pages of him trying to find a hot dog. Like, I did pick up one of the comic books, and it was like, oh, there's a farm down the road is having trouble and we've got to go and blow up the robots. And I was like, I don't care.
So is there any Sonic media other than that anime adaptation that you think has come close to nailing it, or has it basically all been downhill since then?
Well, I enjoy the Dreamcast games, Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2. Those were the first ones that made the... Well, actually, I guess the anime movie had some people in it, but they were kind of like... There was a cat girl, and there's like a person who looks a bit weird, and it's set on this weird planet. Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2 are very much set on Earth, and it's very much Sonic in the middle of a city with human-looking people. And outside of the weirdness of that, it's another one where they really went hard on Dr. Robotnik wants to kill everybody, and he's a bad person. And there's a lot of... again, like the side story for one of the characters comes down to her being chased by a robot, having to escape from the robot, and then at the end of the game, the robot sacrificing itself to free the animal that's inside the robot. And you're like, oh, there we go. I mean, it's the same thing as the movie. But, again, there's something there. There's something to, like Sonic in this one is sort of a bit of a blank slate. But Tails, his whole side of the story comes down to him feeling like he's just copying Sonic. And so it ends with him having a showdown with Dr. Robotnik and defeating him and being like, I can do it without Sonic. They give Knuckles a backstory where he's living on an island looking after the Master Emerald, which gets broken, and he has to track down the pieces of the Emerald, and then that's tied into Sonic's story, and he needs the pieces of the Emerald, and so they have a rivalry. And so those games... Sonic Adventure 2 was the beginning of the end, I think, because they introduced Shadow the Hedgehog, which is the red and black hedgehog who talks in a gravelly voice. And in his own spin-off game, he said the word "damn," which was a big deal at the time.
That's some hardcore PG swears.
Yeah. They publicized the fact that the game had a swear word in it before releasing it, and then the game came out and it was the word "damn," which was just fantastic. But yeah, spoiler alert: this character, I'm now noticing a theme saying it out loud. This character sacrifices himself for the good of the planet. So just the fact that at some point they were willing to kill characters and have characters make sacrifices, and you knew who they were. You could always tell what the characters, what their character was, what they were going after, probably how they would react to a situation, and it was always consistent. And sort of from that point on, once they realized, oh, people love this Shadow the Hedgehog guy, it just became like, well, now there's a Silver Hedgehog, and now there's Blaze the Cat, and now there's this, and now there's, and you're just like, I can't keep track of any of this.
No, and I mean, part of having such an enormous gallery of characters as well, as I imagine it makes very, very fertile ground for the furries, which is a thing. You did say a thing in passing, which I think is maybe worth just highlighting, which is that there is a fundamental kind of plot detail that goes back right to the very first Sonic, which sounds like it would be a really good hook for kind of drama and tension and villainy for Dr. Robotnik. And it doesn't sound like they've made much use of it, which is that going right back to the first Sonic, every time you bust open a robot, there is an animal inside it that you're rescuing by doing that. So a fundamental conceit of the franchise is that you have to fight essentially slaves and free them from being combat slaves in order to win. And that's really heavy if you stop and think about it on its own terms.
Yeah. They see the early 90s when all these cartoons were on the air. That was when they really honed in on that aspect specifically, in quite a way that as a kid was quite upsetting. Because I mentioned this guy, Ken Penders, that was running the comic strip, and one of the 3 cartoons, which was a little bit darker, they very openly were saying Dr. Robotnik is kidnapping our friends and turning them into robots, which we then have to kill. And that was a big factor, was that Sonic had an uncle and he got roboticized. And he genuinely never came back to the comic. He was actually, as far as I know, I mean, for all I know, it ran for 20 years. As far as I know, he was actually killed, and Sonic had to deal with his uncle now trying to kill him as a robot. But again, once we get into sort of past the Dreamcast games, they sort of got cold feet about stuff like that, and sort of just sanded the edges off. Well, actually, the mistake they made was there's an infamous game that was just called Sonic the Hedgehog that came out in 2006. Everyone refers to it as Sonic 06, and it was so over-the-top melodramatic and so serious and so dark that everybody hated it. And I think the lesson Sega took from that was, Sonic should be silly. Don't touch any of that. When the message they should have taken was, this game sucked. But, you can't control what corporations are going to learn from their mistakes. So.
Alas, you can't. But, I mean, it is a thing where it seems like if it had been married to a game that was actually good, it would have worked. Because one of the things that video games, in particular as a medium, are full of, and I kind of love as a creative choice, is just total unmitigated batshit nonsense delivered with complete confidence. Like, I really love the Assassin's Creed. Well, up until they killed off the main character and just created spin-offs forever for that don't really relate to the plot anymore. But the central conceit of Assassin's Creed is total nonsense. But they're just this is definitely how it is, and they're so committed to that complete.
Well, the first thing that came to mind when you said that was Kingdom Hearts.
Exactly.
Where you've got Mickey Mouse. Yeah, he's running around with these anime characters, and you've got, Mickey Mouse going, woohoo! And then it's just, everything is so dramatic and serious, and it's wonderful. Whereas somehow, tonally, something was off about this game. And, Sonic had a love interest who was a human woman, and there's a scene where they kiss, and there's stuff like that where you're like, this is not where we want to be going. The anime movie touches on that because it's very Japanese and it's an anime. There's a cat girl who is almost a love interest for Sonic, but they never go there. It's almost a bit weird, but they know, people don't want to see Sonic kissing a human woman. That's weird. And thankfully,
I almost feel like if they had gone there, that would be easier to swallow, because you can, the nature of Sonic's cast of characters is there's one of everything. Until they started having 5 million color swapped hedgehogs, but for a long time there's one hedgehog and one fox and one echidna and one bat and one cat. And so the idea that they're just kind of singular animal people who have relationships of various sorts with one another kind of makes sense. but when
Yeah.
like combining that with a human is kind of, I think, too obvious.
Yeah, when Sonic is on planet Earth and Dr. Robotnik is a human man with human proportions, and there's a human woman who is a princess, and she's like, I think I'm in love with this cartoon hedgehog, it just gets a bit, yeah. But yeah, obviously the lesson they took from that was to strip everything dark out and just kind of no story. We don't want a story. He's a werehog now. Oh, it's his birthday. Oh, he's in prison. Sadly, that's where we're at.
Well, this seems like an excellent point to take a halfway break, so we shall do that right now, and we'll be back right after this.
Support this show and others like it by giving a donation. For more information, go to www.mpr.nz/donate.
You're listening to Reserved Recommendations. This is a show about complicated art and great trash, and we are talking about something that I think is firmly in the great trash category at this point, Sonic the Hedgehog. And I'm talking to Stuart Drake. Thanks again for being on, and welcome back.
No problem at all. Thanks for having me.
So, I guess this is a thing that you mentioned a little bit back at the start of the conversation, and I think it's worth going into because it's one of the things that would make me hesitant to recommend anything about Sonic other than like the first couple of early games as kind of an example of people doing like 16-bit games really, really well. 32-bit games as well, I suppose, is like the fan communities of Sonic are like huge, and even by the standards of huge online fan communities, they're like deeply weird, and some of them are very hostile. And you said that you'd had a bit of kind of participation around the edges of some of these, so I wondered if that was a thing that you could talk to at all.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I've found as I've gotten older, the things that always respond to me are things with a little bit of a meta edge. Things that kind of are a little bit self-aware. And the thing that the community that I was a part of wasn't actually a Sonic the Hedgehog community. It was a Sonic the Hedgehog community based around the idea of photoshopping Sonic screenshots to trick people into thinking certain things were in the games. And then over time, it stopped being a trick, and it just became a thing that you would just modify Sonic screenshots and things like that. And so it was this community that wasn't necessarily... We were obviously obsessed with Sonic, but it was this entire community of people that were kind of photoshopping Street Fighter characters into Sonic on the character select screens and spending ages modeling Sonic characters. It was an Australian website. I am not... Anyone can probably figure it out from that, but I'm not going to give the name because as far as I know, the forum is still online, and I don't want that being... dug up, but I've actually I still have a couple of friends that I talk to regularly now. One of them, she was a graphic designer, or was getting into graphic design at the time, and so she was designing Sonic logos and things like that for people's websites, and we became friends because I wanted to make a Sonic website, and so I wanted a logo, and so it was always on the fringes. I was never in a community that was about, we were never... I guess it was. I was going to say I was never in a Sonic the Hedgehog community, but that's me really trying to separate myself from a certain thing that stresses me out a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I can see why it would be stressful. I guess the question I was asking is, I mean, online fandom has a reputation for being weird and nasty, even when it's attached to thoroughly wholesome things and things that like go out of their way to be inclusive and wholesome. I'm thinking of like people who've been on the internet not long enough will have caught like rumors of awful things happening inside of Steven Universe fandom when Steven Universe is kind of like lab grown to be the most wholesome thing in the world for the modern era. But even within that, I get the sense that the hardcore Sonic communities are particularly weird and dark, and I was wondering if you had any insight into like why that was.
I really don't. I honestly, my only experience with hostility is to do with the different eras there have been of Sonic, and the sort of hashtag not my Sonic mentality that sort of seems to come out, where it's like, oh, you like that? Well, you're a piece of shit, you know? And I'm sort of sitting here going, like, it's a cartoon hedgehog, guys. Like, we can... I can't say I've ever had too much experience with anything other than just the hostility to do with things like that, and then people, obviously, that are just full of hate, that are, you know, hateful for being hateful's sake. But,
people being hateful for no particular reason on the internet, who'd have thunk?
Yeah.
Well, I suppose I could speculate a bit about that particular thing of the different fan groups being antithetical to one another, because I mean it is, I imagine, quite weird participating in a fandom where the people who own the franchise have like literally zero loyalty to any particular characterization of their character. And so, you know, if you like goofy, no trouble Sonic, more power to you, but that's a spur of the moment creative decision and there's no reason to expect it to continue. Like, Sega could decide that now Sonic is a completely different thing, and someone else will find that that's their, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And then an entire community will form around that very specific faction, you know, that very specific type of story they're telling. And then the next time a game comes out and it's not that, they're upset and they hate everybody else, and then everybody hates them. I always... there's a chart that I saw years ago that always sticks in my brain, which was... it's the chart sort of depicting the process when a new Sonic game comes out, which is the first part of the circle is they announce the game, and then they release footage of the game, and you start thinking, oh, this might be good. And then it sort of goes around to, this might be good, this might be terrible, and then the game is released, and it's terrible, and you hate Sonic. And then it's restarted at the start, they've announced a new game, oh, this one might be good, and then you just go around the circle again, and again, and again, and every time, inevitably, it sucks. Which is a shame. I always say I'm a Sonic fan, but if I'm ever talking about the games that I would say there are probably 3 great Sonic games. And then there are a few good ones, and then the rest are fine to crap, you know? That's how it goes, unfortunately.
I mean, look, this is a thing that exists outside of video games as well. There are plenty of bands who released like 3 mind-blowing albums, and then, I don't know, they became Scientologists, or the central couple split up and it was only half as good without the original dynamic, or whatever the thing is. But they just kind of muddle along for another 20 years, putting out like really average albums.
Yeah. Not necessarily average, not necessarily the same thing, but I always think of like a band like Arctic Monkeys, where they're constantly changing their sound every album, and there are the people that are like, I only like the first 2 albums, and there are people that are like, the first 2 albums are crap, I only like the slow album, I only like the stoner album, I only, so it happens everywhere.
It does, and I mean, I guess the positive thing is that it's, it's necessary in some ways if you're thinking about people who are constantly experimenting with their sound. Just to stick with music for a second, like it's kind of necessary to accept some rubbish albums on the way to some good ones, because if people do a lot of experiments, not all the experiments work. And not to buy into a false hope cycle around Sonic, which is, as far as video games, been consistently disappointing. But, they always could come up, I suppose, with a gimmick that actually does add something to the game, or they could figure out what about the original formula worked and somehow refine that, or something could happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, the sad thing is that the best Sonic game in recent memory is when they gave full permission to some fans who had pitched the game to Sega. They basically said, you make it. And they honed in on what made those original games great. And it actually came out concurrently with a Sega-produced Sonic game. And the fan-made... the fan-made one was actually Sega-produced as well, but produced by people who started as fans. That film was critically acclaimed. The one Sonic Team produced themselves was trashed. So it is a thing where they genuinely don't know what they have or what to do with this thing, or why people liked any of it in the big... Like, they just don't know. They're just sort of throwing things at the wall and hoping something sticks. Yeah.
So I suppose the elephant in the room with talking about Sonic at the moment as well is that, you know, we quite recently had a Sonic movie with Jim Carrey in it. Did you see it? Is it any good?
I've seen it a few times.
Oh, yes?
As on brand for myself. I travelled, me and my partner Amber Lee, we travelled out of Wellington City to the only cinema that was playing Sonic, just so I could see it. And I like the film a lot, but it hinges almost entirely on the characterization of Sonic, which I've sort of figured out is what I'm interested in. And again, it's because they looked at what they had. Oh, he goes fast. And they said, what are we going to do about this? And so they, basically the story of the film is Sonic lives with a guardian in some dimension somewhere. He gets attacked by an Echidna clan, and his guardian basically throws him through a portal for safety, and he lands on Earth. The only thing he knows is staying alive and being fast, and taking in pop culture that he can. You know, he lives in this little cave, and he's got comic books, and he's got The Flash, he's got this stuff. And it's about him essentially being really, really lonely and not being able to connect with any people. And he gets so depressed about this that he starts running like crazy, pretending to play baseball with himself. There's a fun scene where he plays everybody on the baseball field because he's so fast. So he's running around, he hits the ball, and then while it's flying through the air, he's chewing gum and going, oh, here we go, I'm going to catch it. And then he's also the guy running around, you know. And he does that too fast and accidentally shuts down the power for the city. And so the US government call in Dr. Robotnik to track down this alien that has accidentally done all this damage. And so it's about him connecting with James Marsden, of all people. I'm not sure what... I don't have anything against James Marsden, but if I were to cast him in a film with a cartoon hedgehog, he wouldn't be my first choice. And so it just comes down to the character being very fun, and the story and the film itself being fine is kind of where it lands. Yeah, it's elevated from fine to good just by a charming lead character that you want to see do okay. Yeah.
That's excellent news, because I mean it had looked like it was going to be kind of all of the American 3D animated kids film tropes at once, kind of thrown in a blender in the same way that the Sonic games are kind of like throw everything in them and hope that the milkshake with chili and seaweed and God knows what else tastes good somehow.
Yeah, I was very worried. If you look at all the pre-release information, you've got the producer of the Fast and Furious series. You've got 10 years of development hell. You've got the project being like sent to different studios as people abandoned it and sold it to this people. Then Warner Brothers sold it to Paramount, and this blah blah blah. You had James Marsden, who was in that animated. Oh, he was in Hop, the movie with the Easter Bunny.
Oh God, yes.
Played by Russell Brand. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, oh God, this is all terrible. Like, this is going to be the worst piece of crap I've ever seen. Then obviously they released the trailer and it had that horrible design for Sonic. Again, this is the baffling thing, is that the only thing this series has going for it is appealing characters and an interesting world. And they redesign the character and set the thing on planet Earth, and it's just baffling. So thankfully, I guess for once, internet vitriol... it had a good result. I don't want to say it was a good thing, because apparently the VFX artists were basically worked to the bone and then fired as soon as the project was finished. But the finished project was better off after the internet vitriol, which I'm quietly thankful for, but very sorry about the labor abuse that occurred to get it to happen.
I mean, it is the there is no ethical consumption under capitalism. Once again,
exactly. If I want to watch a Sonic the Hedgehog movie, I have to grind my teeth and just know that people suffered to get it made.
So I had no idea that it had been in development for that long. 10 years.
Oh, I'm not sure if specifically this version of the movie.
Right.
But a Sonic movie, I think the first inklings of this project, I think, were in the 90s sometime. And then it sort of, once the Dreamcast once Sonic Adventure was coming out, I think they started trying to shop it around again. And then this Ken Penders guy that I mentioned that ran the comic strip, for a while there, he was in charge of developing a film, and he was going to go and make this weird animated film with all of his side characters he'd created. And then, at some point it got sold to Paramount, who gave it to the Fast and Furious guy, Neil Moritz, I think, and then he was the guy that somehow got this thing moving.
Speaking of utter nonsense delivered with confidence, the Fast and Furious movies are kind of a platonic ideal of that by this stage. They've just kind of transitioned into their own little pocket universe with its own rules that's like nothing to do with conventional movies or action movies at all at this point.
Yes, something I love about that series is the way they obviously reached a point where they sort of thought, we need to jump the shark here. We need to, I don't know if they've gone to space, but, we need to go to space with the story. And from that point on, it's like, you think back to like the first Fast and Furious, where the story was like, oh, we have to steal some hard drives, I think, was that? They were stealing some PCs.
So like
it was a heist film.
Yeah, the guy who died, like the guy where the actor died, he had to infiltrate the street racing people because he was a cop, I think.
Oh yeah, that's right. Of course.
And then he falls in love with Vin Diesel's sister. I think she's supposed to be. Yeah, that's my memory of it.
Yeah, anything before Fast and Furious 7 is very foggy to me, because that's when I went to see that out of curiosity because I knew Paul Walker had passed away, and I was curious to see what happened. And halfway through the movie, I was looking at my friend going like, is this the best movie I've ever seen? I didn't know this is what Fast and Furious was. I thought this was like lowest common denominator trash, and this is elevated trash. This is wonderful. They know exactly what they're doing, and then in the next one, Vin Diesel's a bad guy and he's with Charlize Theron and they're in a super spy base. I saw Hobbs and Shaw, the spin-off. And Idris Elba finds like an Iron Man suit of armor and he's committing crimes in a suit of armor, and it's Idris Elba picking up cars and throwing them in like an Iron Man suit. And I went to see it with my boss at the time, and she was leaning over going like, is this what these movies are? I thought this was about car racing, And I was like, there's going to be some cars at some point. We're going to see some cars. Someone's probably going to grab onto a helicopter. Other than that, anything goes. Which is kind of beautiful.
Yeah, Vin Diesel will probably say the word family a few times.
That's what's very interesting to me about how much they genuinely don't care, is that Paul Walker passed away. They kind of retooled that film to be about his character a little bit. And then using his brother as a stand-in, they wrote an ending scene where Vin Diesel and him are going down a road kind of parallel to each other, and they make eye contact, and there's a voiceover from Vin Diesel saying he has to go on his own journey now, but he'll always be my brother. And then Paul Walker kind of takes a turn, and they drive off in different ways, and that's the last shot. So the last thing Vin Diesel says is, this is my family, he'll always be my brother, and the entire plot of Furious 8 is Vin Diesel betrays everybody. And you're like, Paul Walker died for real, and you just threw that out the window for a plot twist. I think actually it was a bait and switch, and in the end he was actually a good guy, But it just seemed, watching the trailers, I was going, this is just a slap in the face to everything the previous film was about.
So we are coming up on time. I guess a final question for you before we do our wrap up things is, you mentioned earlier that it would be kind of a dream to get to write a Sonic animated thing, and I guess in the spirit of the fan works actually being better than the authorized ones at this point, what do you reckon would be the angle there to make a Sonic thing be good at this point?
I think if it were me, it would be so stripped back and simple, would be the thing. Is it would go back to the 90s anime movie, and it would be, there are just little things in that, like Sonic and Tails live on an island, and it's got all this old junk technology, and they've turned it all into planes and stuff they can use, and they have a computer lab, and just the idea of Sonic and Tails being these characters, Knuckles doing his own thing, Dr. Robotnik is up to something evil, and they have to stop him. Finding an interesting way to tell that story. He's turning animals into robots. They're animals themselves. There are stakes there. You've got this library of characters. I just kind of want them to cut the bullshit, is essentially it. I just want a very simple, charming, straightforward story featuring these characters, because it's all there. Just for some reason, they don't know what to do with it.
And I suppose to have the capacity for stuff to happen to those characters as well, because that does seem to be a thing that they're very resistant to.
Yeah, exactly. Like I say, in this anime movie, Sonic gets punched in the face. He literally collapses from exhaustion on the ground in the snow and lies there dying until Tails can help him. He falls from space onto the ground and, makes a crater while he lies there unconscious. Things like that they don't allow to happen anymore. I mean, you'd have to fill the characters out because, like you say, they're essentially blank slates, and especially now with the way they make the games, they're basically nonsense characters that don't have personalities. So you'd have to do a bit of work there in terms of tidying it up. But it's all there. Just someone who gives a shit has to be in charge, I think.
So, thank you very much for talking. This has been a fascinating discussion. I have learned things about Sonic that I never knew, which is, the aim of the exercise. There are two things that I like to do by way of finishing off the episodes of this podcast. And the first one is to ask you for recommendations of stuff. So if people have been listening to this conversation and they want a good way into knowing what is good about Sonic, or I guess if there's like stuff that's kind of tangentially related to Sonic and his whole vibe that would be worth people getting their heads around, do you have any recommendations for those sorts of things?
My main recommendation would be the Sonic anime movie. Yes, so it's just a video on YouTube. It's just called Sonic the Hedgehog Anime Movie 1999 or something along those lines. And it's just a full movie uploaded. Watch the first 10 minutes, and if Sonic telling Tails to leave him alone and then them going on a journey isn't at least mildly interesting to you, then probably don't bother with anything else, because that's what I'm into. Is it's a little bit charming. There's an interesting story there. It's for free on YouTube. I think it's 50 minutes long. Like, it's really not anything big to get into. And then the other thing would be to check out Sonic Mania, which is the game I mentioned that was developed by fans of the Sonic franchise. It's both a new Sonic game and a remastering of some old Sonic levels. And it's just a very charming, very competently made platform game featuring the Sonic characters. If you have never played Sonic before, pick it up. It's very easy to play. They've stripped out the stuff from the 90s games that was frustrating and just made it a fun game. So that's the dream, really.
Excellent. The thing that Sonic brings back to me, kind of unrelated to even the games and the characters to some extent, is the soundtrack music, particularly from the first couple of games. So I am certain that you can find all of those things on YouTube, but they are some of the most kind of earwormy and evocative bits of music composed for that era of gaming, and there are some really talented people just pushing the Sega systems to their absolute limit in terms of what they could do musically. So checking that stuff out as well, I think, is worthwhile.
Yeah, I have to say, I actually messed up by not mentioning the music, both of the games and of the anime movie, because the music in Sonic absolutely rocks. Like you say, they really pushed the Sega stuff to the limit. Anime movie's got a great soundtrack. Even the later games, they tend to hire pop punk dudes and get them to record a song for a Sonic game, like Jarrett Reddick from Bowling for Soup did a Sonic one. The vocalist from Zebrahead did a Sonic song. So they always rock. They're always good.
Magic. So the last thing I like to do by way of wrapping up is give you an opportunity to plug your shit. What things do you have to plug? Obviously, I wholeheartedly recommend that people go and check out the Fatalities. I saw you play at Snails and got mildly obsessed, and every mission to school involved me inflicting Crybaby on my children another time. But, are there things aside from that?
Well, there is the Fatalities, which you can find on Bandcamp, thefatalities.bandcamp.com. After listening to your little bit, I have added a pay if you would like to option. I think it's all still on there for $0, but if you'd like to give me $1, you can. Other than that, I'm doing a little bit of independent filmmaking work. So I've just started up got my YouTube channel set up, which is just called Drake and Drake and Company, which is just me and whoever I can rope into working on stuff, making movies and making films. So I think that's about it. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, those are both well worth checking out. Thank you very much for coming and talking about Sonic.
Oh, thank you for having me. Thank you for letting me talk about Sonic.
You've been listening to Reserved Recommendations, a radio show and podcast from Manawatu People's Radio, Te Reo Irirangi o ngā tangata o Manawatu. The show is produced and presented by me, Hugh Dingwall, and I also composed our theme music. It's called Sack Jazz, and you can find it at wolfboy.bandcamp.com. You can find me on the internet at Objective Realty on Twitter, and you can find the show on Facebook under Reserved Recommendations. If you've got a reserved recommendation of your own, feel free to pitch it to me in either of those two places. And if you enjoyed the show, why not go ahead and recommend it to a friend? You can find past episodes at www.mpr.nz/show/reserved on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And remember, Manawatu People's Radio is a non-profit radio station. If you enjoy this or any of their other fine audio programming, why not fling them a couple of dollars? Go to mpr.nz/donate for more information.